Hi there. Welcome to Creation Station Monthly. I'm Bob from Creation Station. This is our monthly show where we take a good, long, extended look with two people about being creative in whatever topic they find that their creativity lets them express themselves. Today, keeping with our Oceans of Possibility theme for the summer learning, is oceans. And we have two very fun people with us today. Miss Jeanette, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How about
Neil.
yourself?
Doing great. And Neil, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited.
So, this is our show. If you haven't seen one of these episodes before, this is where we get two people to talk about a topic who've never met each other and do. And we're gonna kick it off with you, Miss Jeanette. Could you tell us how did you first start getting interested in being creative with oceans? What spurred that interest for you?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I first will say that it took me a very long time to kind of consider myself a creative. I think that as a scientist, especially, someone who's trained and has a PhD, typically are trained to go into academia, and there is a model for you, if you will, on what to do in science and all of those types of things. But eventually, I started really thinking about science and ocean science in particular, um, in terms of curiosity and how science is essentially the backbone that supports curiosity. And there's so much potential and creativity in that. So it took a while for me to get here. But essentially, I kind of got here by asking questions and realizing that there was creativity in my approach to understanding ocean science, that there's so much that we don't know, there's so much that's underexplored, or so many untapped resources. That kind of spurred my creativity. And I will say, specifically, as being a marine microbiologist and studying the things that you can't see without a microscope, I don't carry around a microscope to study the ocean, right? I have to be creative in my approaches and
Now,
how.
now you've blown my whole idea of you. I follow the whole Instagram and I'm like, she's always got something in her pocket.
I know, but trust me, it took me a while to kind of consider myself a creative. But long story short, I think I kind of embraced that thought with just simply embracing that there is a curiosity and creativity to science, especially ocean science, when there's so much that we don't know or haven't seen. So I think it took, after the PhD, getting into the field and then understanding, like, yeah, there's a lot of creativity to how we approach things, especially when we have limited resources. That also sparked creativity.
Neil, you're just getting started on your career. You're at the
So,
opposite end of the scale. How'd you get into this?
I consider myself an early career scientist. I am right at the end of my PhD. So, basically, my academic career is hopefully about to blossom. And it's at the point where I now need to start coming up with projects, topics, and things that I personally want to do. I think that we're going to have a really good conversation here because if you notice, my face was lighting up when Jeanette was talking because I was like, oh, these are some of the same ideas that I really love. Um, it took me a while to get into science itself. I had tried many different career paths, such as engineering. But what I really found was that I like science because it tells stories. And how I tell these stories, first from my training as a geologist and eventually moving into ocean science, is that we have a history to tell and we have ways to look at the earth to tell these stories. So the creative part for me is looking at what just looks like a bunch of scrambled data and being like, you have a story to tell. How can you tell that in a way that would interest people?
Okay, Neil, ask your question of Jeanette. You started there. You started, yeah, I could see it right there. You were like,
All
wait, I
right.
want to know. Ask away.
Well, let's start off with something simple. I really like those books behind your head. What are those?
Yes, so that is a part of my creativity as well. So I am a children's science book author. Um,
So
and
cool.
what kind of sparked that, is really attempting to create what I thought was missing when I was growing up and loving science, but could never articulate that I love
Hmm.
science. And I always say for ocean science, it's something that I stumbled upon. Like, I grew up loving science. I thought maybe I would be a medical doctor because if you like science, that's what you do. And then I got to college. They didn't have a pre med program. So I thought maybe I'll do chemistry because that was my favorite science at the time. Long story short, we had a marine science department, and I went into the marine science department. I fell in love because I learned to study the ocean is to study a combination of sciences. Like, you can't separate the
Hmm.
chemistry from the biology, even the geology. I had a geology course, I fell in love with it, meteorology, all these things that intersect ocean science. And I said, I didn't know that. And I want young people to know that. So, my first book is Science is Everywhere, Science is for Everyone. And it really does connect young people with all of the sciences in nature, geology, as you mentioned, botany, oceanography, all of these things, zoology. So if you love animals, you can say, I want to be a zoologist. And most young people
Yeah.
don't have the language to say, I want to be a zoologist. They just know I go to the zoo to see animals. And then my second book is Jada's Journey Under the Sea, right here. And this book focused exclusively on oceanography. And the goal here is to kind of break out all of these different sciences that interact with ocean science. So I had to start with oceanography first, but eventually it'll be more of the ologies that all kind of encompass ocean science.
That's really
Now,
cool. I
where did you
absolutely
go to
love
school,
those.
Jeanette? Let me ask, where did you go to school that you had all of those things combined? And Neil, and then you kick in with where you're going to school and how you're getting all that combined in for you.
So I went to undergrad at Hampton University, which is a historically Black college university. It actually was founded for both Black Americans and Native Americans. And we are located right on the Hampton River. And so when I made that decision to walk into the Marine Science Department, I literally was sitting on a bench on campus looking at the Hampton River, and it's so beautiful. So I'm looking, and then I look down and I say, see, Marine Science Department. And I'm like, oh, I like science. Let me just go in there and check it out and see. But literally it was like the science I had been waiting for because I had all the chemistry courses and all the things that excited me about science, but then I had all these other cool, interesting sciences that intersected with the ocean.
What's your school there, Neil?
Cool. So right now I go to the University of Southern Mississippi. I am at Stennis Space Center campus, which is a specialized section for oceanographers. My current set of projects, which, to me involve quite a bit of creativity, are all using data from what's called the International Geotraces Program, which is a international collaboration trying to look at trace elements, basically um, different chemistry in the ocean that tells us different stories. So whether it's an element that tells us how the biology is working, whether it's an element that gives us an idea of how like Earth processes happen, or even sometimes, and some of my favorite ones are ones that give us an information about how Earth has like interacted in the past. So what makes an old Earth different from the new Earth?
So tell me, 'cause I was just reading an article this morning about how they've got some new studies on I forget what the aquifer, the Permian, Colorado, something aquifer. It's like one of the deep original aquifers that's under North America, and how it's been percolating new water into the old water, from millions of years ago. Where do you guys, as scientists, draw the line from oceans to that sort of thing? As you were mentioning, because Neil, it just clicked in my head, is like when you were talking about elements and this, and I know they were doing radioisotopes, something or other, but give us a definition. What's the difference in between doing ocean science versus lake science or river science or whatever? What would you call it?
Do you want me to start answering?
Either of you,
it?
go for it. Go for it.
You can take turns. Go for it.
Well, so I'm gonna answer your question in a technical way, and then I'm gonna circle back and tell you, I think, more of the big picture kind of answer to that now. So ocean or marine equals or means salt water. So we consider marine to be salt water. It has a certain amount of salt or salinity, whereas freshwater is typically known as limnology, which is the study of freshwater, versus oceanography is the study of ocean or marine. So that has less salt water, and that would be like your lakes. Then you have things like rivers and even bays, which we would refer to as more brackish, meaning that there are parts that are freshwater that flow into the larger mouth of the ocean. So they tend to have a combination of some fresh at some point and saltier at others. But present day, we now would say that there is one ocean. And, you know, where I work currently, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which, by the way, all of these views are my own and not of NOAA. Just have to put that disclaimer out there. We monitor and do work with the oceans and Great Lakes, and so much of the water or the water cycle is connected. And so technically, ocean is salt water and the limnology is the study of fresh water, but there is technically one ocean, and at some point they all do connect.
What do you think, Neil?
Well, I'm really glad someone gave the technical answer so I can give the more fun answer. And that is, I like to envision the ocean is a body that includes everything about it. So it is the chemistry of the water and everything in it. It is the biology in it. It is the physics that make up this machination of moving water. And it's not the only reservoir on Earth. You know, reservoir just being this collection of features. You know, I would say the terrestrial system is its own reservoir. The atmosphere is its own reservoir. And whenever a reservoir interacts with the ocean, us ocean scientists need to know about it. So we're not limited to the study of just the ocean you can walk out and swim into. I've seen studies done on atmospherics that would try to take the chemistry of the air and see how it percolates into the top of the water. We do studies on dust that goes off of the Sahara, and as it starts to settle into the water, we need to calculate what's coming in, what is its effect on biology, what is its effect on the geology, the chemistry. So my fun answer is there's nothing an ocean scientist wouldn't study as long as it affects the ocean.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Totally. That is the fun answer. And also going back to the point of the creativity in ocean, getting back to this, like there's so much creativity because it simply does, like it expands our planet, literally. Like our planet is basically the ocean planet, right? And you know that's what makes us, or that's what allows us to be so creative, like you said, from the land to the air to air droplets, aerosols, all of those things. And even the ocean floor, I always tell people the ocean floor looks a lot like terrestrial land. There's valleys, there's mountains, there's peaks, there's so much, you know, in the ocean, below the ocean, above the ocean, all of those things that are kind of impacting our day-to-day lives.
Okay, so let me. Oh, you finish, Neil. You go.
I was just gonna say, it was like, fun fact, your program is based in Florida. Like a bunch of your viewers are probably looking down and can see like their former like shelves from, you know, ancient oceans that have been risen up to make said Florida. So like you guys have seen what an ocean bed looks like even up close.
Oh, I walk on it every day out back in my house. Yeah. And you both, I mean, the brackish water of the Everglades. Here's the Sahara dust. And I'm like, yeah, that's what helps our hurricanes. And down here in South Florida, we're like pretty intimate with the whole concepts here of all this. And that brings me kind of to the next question. It's kind of a two-parter for you guys. What kind of equipment do you use on a regular basis? But then what is your ideal perfect equipment that you'd really like to have? Because I had a hurricane hunter on and she was like, I just want new airplanes because all their airplanes are getting end of service. Tell me, what do you guys think what's your most basic thing that you use right now as your equipment?
Neil, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I say this is probably hard, which is why we're both thinking about it.
I know.
It's a good thing.
No, it is a good thing. So first of all, as I said, the majority of the projects I do through this International GeoTraces program is our lab measures a certain set of elements. I'm not even going to bother listing them because most people don't care about the lesser known periodic table. But if you've ever watched a crime TV show and they walk into the lab and they're like, all right, we scraped something off of the wall that we think the killer touched. Here, figure out what the substance is in it. They use a machine called a mass spectrometer. So just like that stereotypical TV show, we can take elements from the ocean, we can isolate those elements, and then we can run it through a machine that roughly counts the atoms. That's a very big simplification of said
So Neil,
process.
for someone who doesn't know mass spectrometer or
Yeah.
can't picture it, as I was teasing Jeanette earlier about taking the microscope out to the ocean, you're not taking a mass spectrometer around with you. That you're just
Mass
grabbing samples,
spectrometer
right?
is about the size of a car.
Okay, then, yeah.
The one we have is bolted down because it's got to be $1 million plus machine. And it's essentially a lot of electric circuitry and big magnets. And these magnets are basically meant to make the atoms go into different locations so that they can be counted.
Okay, cool.
Now, I don't use this machine too often because, as you can imagine, running a car-sized machine is very expensive. And we actually have a really good one, but I've heard rumors that there are way better ones that I could use. So I guess, and this is probably at the detriment to my absolute favorite technician who runs our mass spec, we should get an upgrade there.
Tell me, Jeanette, what's your gear that you're using on a regular basis?
Yeah, so for me, that is a hard one. Okay, so I would say going back to I don't carry around a microscope. What I do is, and I love crime scene investigation, the analogy. I always consider myself to be CSI for the ocean science, for the ocean, in that, just like a detective goes on a crime scene and they hope to find the DNA that is left behind by the suspect, I, in the ocean, hope to find the DNA left behind by organisms. And I do that using a technique called eDNA, which stands for environmental DNA. So the same way we have DNA, all living things have DNA, even those in the ocean. And the same way that we can shed our skin or hair or cough or leave behind blood, organisms in the ocean do the same thing. They're constantly shedding scales, skin, saliva, or feces, whatever that may be. And so the instrument that I use the most is called a CTD, which stands for conductivity, temperature, and depth. It's basically this machine that allows you to just go sample water. But the great thing about it is that as it's sampling water, it takes the physical features of the water, the chemistry, the salinity, the temperature, and it allows you to get certain depths of the ocean. So it's a machine used to basically collect the parameters of the ocean. But once I have that water sample, even though I can't physically see what's there, when I do eDNA testing, I can then identify all the things that are in the ocean that I've never seen.
So you're taking core samples of the ocean.
Yes. Yes.
That
Yeah.
is awesome. I
Yeah.
didn't even know that was possible.
Yes. And you could,
Mhm.
the great thing about an eDNA technique is I could say, I want to picture a snapshot of everything possible that could be there. Or I can say, I want a snapshot of just this one thing that I'm interested in that may or may not be there. And so it just depends on how you kind of set up the experiment. So another piece of equipment that I would use to do that is called a PCR machine, which stands for a polymerase chain reaction. A lot smaller than a car. It's a little square box, maybe even smaller than like a laptop, if you will. And you basically what it allows you to do is target the DNA that you're looking for and amplify it to the point where you have lots and lots and lots of copy of this DNA to be able to identify what's there. And so those are pretty much like my go-to techniques and equipment that I can't live without, to be quite frank.
Nice, nice, nice. Let's twist this around to the other side of things. And Jeanette, I'll have you go first. Who inspired you to start this? Who did you have someone? Was it you playing in mud puddles and then your parents being, okay, well, that's okay, you can do this? Or did you tack on to somebody?
It's more to maybe it's more, I would say, I had like this innate curiosity for nature around me. That's kind of how I started. And I have four older siblings who are really athletic, just great, all American, excel in sports, right? And so when I came along, being the youngest, it was almost like an expectation that I would be like good in sports too. And that was not the case. And instead, I really was just like a nerd who loved to explore things. I literally was the kid who like watched ants. Now I understand like quorum sensing and how they, communicate with each other. But I was always fascinated with the like exact line of ants, right? Like how they would form together and do these like interesting things, and fascinated with plants. I'm sure I was the only kid that loved bees and beehives. And so I just always had like this interest in nature and animals and things around me and why things were working the way that they worked.
Did
And
you
I
grow
think
up in Virginia?
I did not. I actually grew up in Delaware, which to this day still has some of the pristine beaches of the US. But I just grew up with like curiosity in nature, and I think eventually it was clear to my family like I was different, but we're gonna let her be different. And she's clearly not going to do sports, and we'll just see where it goes. But I think that pretty much is how it happened for me. I didn't really have one particular person, but I did have supportive people in my life who just understood that I was different and supported me just pursuing the things that I love.
How about you, Neil? Did you have
So,
that person who pushed you
well,
ahead or what?
before I start, I just want to say one little fun fact for the viewers. When Jeanette was talking about CTD machines, so basically you toss them into the ocean and they can go down really, really far. So there is a tradition amongst oceanographers to get styrofoam cups and draw pictures on them
Yes.
because as your machine goes down, water pressure is going to increase. So all the air in the styrofoam cup is going to leave, and your cup is going to go from, this big to shrinking down to like this big, and all of your little pictures are going to get shrunk down, and it's so funny. And yeah, I can see Jeanette laughing because it's one of our favorite things to do whenever
Yes.
we're on a research expedition.
Yes.
So I don't really have a glorious reason to have become a scientist, but I can tell you about one moment that really shifted what I wanted to do. I had started my college career going into engineering, and I thought, okay, I lived in Rhode Island. That's where me and my family are from. So I was going to the University of Rhode Island, which is very famed for its ocean resources. I'm like, cool. If I'm going to be an engineer, I might as well do ocean engineering. That sounds kind of fun. And I was not having a great time doing ocean engineering. And I remember vividly walking through a laboratory where they did some of the robot and AOV testing, autonomous vehicles. Basically, you can let the robot go down and do all the sampling for you. And I remember there was like this computer feed of something going on, and I'm just like, oh, hey, that's really cool. Like, what does this mean? Like, what data is the robot taking? And the instructor was like, yeah, I'm not really sure. We don't do that. So what I realized was a lot of ocean engineers kind of stop right after the robot. Not all of them. There are some who are really good multidisciplinary scientists, but I wanted to know what that feed was. So I spent a little time soul searching, and I eventually decided to shift gears. As I said, I'm trained as a geologist, but I've always been specialized in the ocean to some degree. So I started working for different laboratories. My advisor, Rebecca Robinson, one of my committee members, John King. And I remember walking into his lab and looking on the wall, and it was basically a boat had gone through and used a sound profiler to do the entire bottom of this whole bay. And I looked at that and went, that is the exact data of that one day where I looked at it, and I really wanted to know what it was. So I knew I was in the right field when I finally somehow was able to locate this mysterious thing I'd been thinking about for years. I didn't know at the time how different science and engineering were. And to me, the fun of being the scientist, you can have a lot of fun being the creator for things like robots, but you get to be an explorer as a scientist.
Tell us about that one there, Neil. With the framing it as, I usually ask people, do you think you can turn this creative thing into a career? And both of you obviously have been able to do this. Is it possible for someone, or what can someone do who's interested in oceans, but is not interested in going this whole PhD route? What other kind of stuff do they do, Neil? What if just the average
I
person on
know
the street?
a lot of people who are not passionate about the ocean itself, but are more passionate about environmental conservation or doing something in a more localized capacity. So there are many career opportunities where you may not be a researcher, you may not even be helping a researcher, but we need people to do things like basic sampling of our lakes and water sound. You don't have to be a full-on researcher to have a passion for going out to the beach every couple of days to see how the water quality is. There's a lot of opportunities in the communication of science. So you don't have to do the science itself, but we need people who have the talent to turn all of the jargon that me and Jeanette are saying into something that the general public can understand. I have already had to define multiple terms because I realized that the viewers aren't familiar with it. And a smarter presenter would have just cut those out and said it in a more simplified form.
So
So
this is just conversations going back and forth between people. This is how things evolve.
Yeah.
So I think there are a couple opportunities in that route, and I'm sure Jeanette has a couple more ideas.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I think the term that we often use for this is called citizen science, and it really is just citizens doing science regardless of your background. And often there's training on what to collect, where to collect, how to collect, and then you can just give those samples to the university or company or, whoever is kind of running or processing those samples. So I think there's a huge opportunity for citizen science. Communication obviously is a big one, and communication doesn't always have to be formal. It could also be you being the liaison between a research center and your community and communicating what's going on in your backyard. As the public is also a stakeholder, right? So it could also be showing up to community-based, you know, hearings or meetings about what's going on and the environment and the ocean. How do decisions impact you? Like how do you want to contribute to decision making? Like all of these things are possible. Because I work in government, I'm always thinking about it from that perspective of like a citizen and how what I do heavily impacts the citizen and how I approach my job, thinking about taxpayers and their dollars and the citizens and the services that we provide as a federal entity. So I think there's so many roles, whether that's like talking to your congressman or woman about the ocean near you and what they're doing to support efforts for conservation. Like all of those things are possibilities. It's pretty much endless.
And the
And
things for someone like we're down here in South Florida, so all of us are impacted by the ocean. But even if someone who's out there in the rest of the United States or around the world, we get people who watch this from all over the world. If you're not on the ocean, edge of the ocean, but you're still interested in that stuff, what do you recommend for someone who's trying to figure out what to do and how to do it?
well, one, I will say that even if you're not near an ocean, you're impacted by the ocean. Every other breath you take, you can thank the ocean for the oxygen.
Mhm.
Like we're all impacted by it. And so one thing I would say is oftentimes, even for like the Midwest or places that may not necessarily be near not an oxygen, an ocean, there are usually programs that still kind of liaison with areas that are not a part of the ocean. I know, for an example, just because I know this, as an example, there's something called National Sea Grant, which is a part of like the federal government, but also state government, and they're located all around the country at universities next to the ocean, but each of them interfaces to another state nearby that may not be close to the ocean. So even if you're not close to the ocean, at this point there are not too many programs that still don't consider you as a stakeholder. So I would say just be diligent about like um, programs or opportunities that are in your area, but don't assume by default that because you're not close to the ocean that they don't exist, because they certainly do.
That leads me to the next question for the two of you. What's the biggest misconception out there about what you do? And do I need to
Uh,
think about the idea that you're both certified scuba divers and you spend half your life down underwater, etc.?
I'm
Or
sure I can come up with a couple of them, but I'm going to say the most obvious first. Oceanography is not necessarily marine biology. And I will tell you, whenever I go sampling, as I said, I study ocean chemistry. So when I go out on a boat, what am I getting? Basically, buckets of water. So when I go to the pier, I walk by all the fishermen, like, oh, hey, what you guys gonna catch today? And I'm like, water. And they're like, what? They expect us as the scientists to go out with a net and grab some fish and be like, oh, the bluefins are out today. So when I'm just like, oh, well, we study chemistry, they have a good laugh at our expense because their expectations was we study dolphins or sharks or lobsters. I mean, Robert, our conversation starting this was you were talking about a shark tagging.
yeah,
So even you started with the assumption that I had a good experience in marine biology, but I study like the literal physics and makeup of the ocean. And, microbiology is part of the field of oceanography, but there are other people who specialize much more intimately in marine biology at the macro level.
Yes, I totally second that. I think the biggest misconception when you hear marine or ocean is simply life. And while there obviously is lots of diversity in the ocean in terms of life, it's not the only thing. That's why I always say like everyone's connected to the ocean. Just breathe, right? And
Mhm.
and people don't think about how the ocean is not just a source of life, but a source of protein. It's a source of ingredients. It's a source of literally the air that we breathe and the chemistry. And when you turn on your TV or now look at your phone to look at the weather, and see what that's going to be, you can thank the ocean for helping to mediate that as well. So there's so much around what we learn as ocean scientists. And I think the biggest misconception are the whales, dolphins, sea turtles, what we call the charismatic macrofauna. And I now distinguish myself by saying I'm a marine microbiologist. So I study the things that you can't see in the ocean without a microscope. And usually people say, and that gets them a little more engaged, but it gives them at least some baseline information of like, don't ask me about whales, dolphins, or sharks because I'm not the person.
So
for
what's the charismatic micro
the
creature?
microbe. Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know if we formally have one. I don't know if we formally have a
Do
charismatic.
tardigrades count in
Is
your
it-
world, or is that a different type of?
I don't know.
I'm a
Neil
fan of E-Hawks, but that's just because I'm an oceanographer.
yes, you know what? Amelia
What?
Hexley, which is um it bioluminesces, right? Or is that the one that does the cacholithos? It creates the white milky things in the ocean. Is that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very ubiquitous in the ocean. So most places you go, you're gonna find it. And for the viewers, uh,
Tell me what this is. I want
coccolithophores
to
are
look
like
it up
Yeah.
real quick. I want to see a picture of this thing now.
yeah,
What is
coccolithophores.
this?
Basically, they are little plankton that have built up shells. In this case, it's made up of a calcium carbonate. So the same thing Tums is made up, and they're like these big circular shield-like things. So they're like
What's
these
that called
little
again? Tell me this. Tell me this name again.
here. Does the Q&A?
No, in the chat. You can type it into the chat, and then I'll be able
If you
to.
just type
Yeah,
this, you'll find it.
Amelia, is it
I can't send anything. Sorry.
But I think the Tums analogy is really good because it can look like Tums in the ocean.
Yeah.
It can look like Tums in the ocean. I think another one I may that I think may also be a part of that category. It's called Vibrio fischeri, and they bioluminesce. So it's like the ocean lighting up at night. And these are bacteria that light up at night. And sometimes if you go to certain areas, when they might do like a presentation where you're out and you can see the ocean lighting up. Those are often Vibrio fischeri, which are bacteria that has this ability to bioluminesce. And believe it or not, the behavior is caused by something called quorum sensing, which is equivalent to talking, like the way that you and I speak. It's how they communicate. They do it through these chemicals, and then they allow for these cues of lighting up at night.
Cool.
So can I go over one more fun
Yeah.
misconception?
Tell me. Tell me.
So, I said before I study elements in the ocean, and I wasn't going to mention them. However, I will mention that all of said elements are radioactive. So I am pulling radioactivity out of the ocean. So the first misconception is that sounds pretty scary, doesn't it? If I were to just tell you without any context, there's radioactivity in the ocean, what is your first impulse?
My first question is this like the banana thing?
Roughly.
Okay.
So most people's first impulse is like Godzilla or something. Or I've had people say, "Oh, is it from that nuclear reaction that happened a couple years ago? You know, like Fukushima?" But one of the misconceptions specific to my lab in studying radioactive elements is these are not dangerous. I'm literally pulling out as much radioactivity as exists naturally in the ocean. So when you go to the beach, there will be some amount of radioactivity in the ocean. There's already some amount of radioactivity in the carbon that makes up you, but we're not going to go over that today.
I love that. And I have one more thing to add about a misconception. Now that we're
Go
on,
for it.
because I think we can both stay on this forever. I think another big misconception um, is really around like the benefits of the ocean. I think so much
Hmm.
of what we discuss about the ocean is, the negative things that are going on or the bad things that are going on, and the need for conservation and great policy, which are all
Mhm.
true. But my background actually is in marine drug discovery. So as a microbiologist, I spent time looking at bacteria associated with sea slugs, algae, to find new and interesting drugs that we can use as human beings. And
Sea slime drugs?
yeah, say that again.
Sea slime drugs? Is that
Uh,
what I
you,
heard?
what my friends often say is that I sling sea slugs for drugs. but but essentially, what we don't hear about are the benefits of the ocean, right? Like how 1/3 of the population get their protein from the ocean, about natural products and drugs that come out of the ocean. There are so many drugs on the market that the chemical or the chemistry came from something that we found in the ocean. And so I think that's another big misconception that I always try to dispel, because I think that people will feel more connected to the ocean and take better care of it if they actually understood the benefits. That it's not just about seeing bottles on a beach and protecting the sea turtles, is also protecting your source of air and protein and literally medicines that could transform how we take care of ourselves and our overall health.
So I always try to ask this either in a success or failure sort of thing, but what is your biggest success? And or instead, what's the biggest failure that you've had as trying to working with oceans and doing this? I mean, besides the generic failure of humankind and just pollution, what is the big failure thing that you've done in your career? Something that you thought was right and you proved yourself wrong, or see, these are the silences that I like.
Yeah.
Makes people think.
I love how we're both doing, like, I just noticed we're both like doing this too. Maybe that's a science thing. Things that make you go, hmm. Oh man.
But there you go. There's our flaw. We all scientists are the exact same.
So this could be okay. So I'm going to start with the success story, and then I'm going to go to failure, and it probably is not even the right. I don't know, maybe there's no wrong or right answer. But
There's no wrong or right answer.
I would definitely say a success story for me has been going back to the marine like drug discovery, is working with an amazing team and helping to locate and discover a marine microbe that is a promising anti-cancer compound. That's by far will be like, yeah, that's my success story. And um I think failure is the reason why it's hard to like answer that is not because I don't fail, it's because failure is so common that I can't really distinguish the story of failure. It's just a part of science. Like, even helping to discover this microbe, that took 6 years of failure. In fact, I was 2 months away from defending before we actually were able to definitively say we have located this microbe that is the producer of this anti-cancer compound. And I wasn't even excited. I literally looked at my advisor and said, can I still graduate in December? Because I was ready to get out of there, right? And
Mhm.
so I think that like there are lots of failure, but that's a part of being a great scientist, is that you learn to fail fast, and before you know it, the failure comes with ease because it's a part of designing the experiments, and you get better and better and better because failure just says no, this did not work, and so now let's change a variable, let's do something different, let's approach it differently so that we can get it to work and replicate it.
How about a new?
So I guess the best I can do is expand on that and say the phrase, the scientific method is a cruel mistress. Basically, I just want to expand upon the point that you think in a bubble. Scientists like come up with an idea, they test it, and then you have miraculous yes or no results. And I completely empathize with saying like, all right, we're going to look at the data. I have no idea what this means. It's going to take me literal. I mean, like, right? I say it's going to take me. I'm talking from experience, like right now, kind of thing. Like, it takes me years to look through this.
Yeah.
You come up with one hypothesis, you send it off for submission, and then one of your co-authors might just be like, this doesn't work, or we should refine these ideas. And as a scientist, you get kind of numb to it, but you get numb in a good way. It's a learning opportunity, not something to shoot yourself down for.
Yeah.
If we were all smart scientists, maybe we could just write up our results, get them published, and then the world would understand exactly what you meant. But that's not the world we live in. Science is complicated. I'm sure microbiology is very hard to run and replicate.
Extremely hard.
Okay,
Um,
so let's go back to that there. Let's take feet off of that one right there, Neil. What is your perfect piece of equipment then? What's the thing that's going to help you replicate something or give a better analysis or find the data that you need? What
so yeah,
is it AI? Is it what is it that's the ideal tool that's
this
coming in the
is
future
this
for
is
you?
so much easier than the tech question, and that is the ocean is ginormous. There is no way to get good data in the physical ocean everywhere and at all times. The program I work for, or sorry, I should say work with GeoTraces, is basically planning yearly or a couple per year what we call cruise transects. Basically, a expedition ship will travel from one location across something because we have a research question about it, and over the course of a year or two, we get one or two of these transects, and we then have to make hypotheses about the entire global ocean off of just a couple lines of data. If I could just have a fleet of ships at all times, always going out, and just, all right, guys, every couple miles, take the entire water column, and just do that over and over again. Oh boy, ocean sciences might be solved at a certain point. But it's so impossible. The ocean is so big. It takes so much time and so much money just to have one ship go out for a couple months. You're not just paying for the ship, but for specialized equipment, for the time of 40 plus scientists and 100 plus crewmates on it. And then we
Yeah.
have, each lab is basically begging the federal government for some amount of that money that they can all pool together, as I said, just to get like one or two of these transects. So yeah, if I wanted to solve the ocean's problems, I would solve what's called discrete data. The idea that we have to separate the data so much.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think one way of also thinking about this, Bob, is instead of like if there's a magic wand or if there's a technology, if there's an equipment, if there's this to solve it, it goes back to the creativity question, right? Like
Mhm.
understanding that the ocean is vast and it's often beyond what we know or can comprehend. And so sometimes we just don't know what we don't know, but that's to me the exciting part about the ocean.
Mhm.
But as scientists, we still know that uh, the experiment or your data or your result has to be reproducible. And so we enter the space and set up an experiment in a way that if you're sampling at a site, then you want to account for, you want to know the exact latitude and longitude because you want to be able to go back there again. You want to know the parameters, and you may want to get samples at various depths and get a triplicate or multiple samples at that depth, right? And so you can't always account for everything, but you want to be able to do as much as you can at one site and pull that data together to account for any variation that you may be able to see. So you want to be able to say, at this particular moment in time, latitude and longitude, these were the results. And then if you do that over time, then you can have something a little more conclusive. So that's kind of the way that we approach it. But if you see something different, you still have the parameters to say this difference could be from variation X. And so you approach it by taking all the data necessary that is needed to make a good decision based on the results you have, but it may not be the final decision or the end all be all. But again, that's the beauty of science.
I've heard that we have more
Mhm.
data about the surface of the moon than we do the depths of the ocean.
Yeah,
It's
that would make
just
sense to
amazing.
me. We have satellite measurements of the
Yeah.
surface of the ocean, but it's very difficult to get machinery to depth because, well, depth creates a lot of pressure.
Yes.
Pressure and a corrosive environment are not conducive to machines. So it takes a lot of effort. And as I said, if you want to go out into the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you've got to get there. You've got to travel the thousands of miles, into the sampling regime. So I'm not surprised if if that's even a feature. Maybe it's a bug in the earth.
Oh, I think it's pretty cool. I want to. We've already gone out. We're almost closing in an hour here, guys. So I want to ask one more question because I want your guys' ideas on this. What can you say to someone who's trying to get started in this field on their own? What's your advice for getting started, no matter what age? I mean, obviously, ideally high schoolish or younger people are going to be getting interested in, but following up on the citizen science idea that you both came up with, what would somebody do to get involved in something like that? Who do they talk to? What do they work on? What do they need? Who are they supposed to be looking at?
Yeah, so I'll start. Google is your friend. And I would say, depending on where you are, just Googling um, citizen science for oceans or, um, yeah, like ocean citizen science near me, literally. And I think that will help you kind of locate um, areas of opportunities. You can also, look at volunteer um, experiences in ocean near me. There's so many nonprofits, again, universities. Obviously, if you're next to the ocean, you may like there may be something that's pretty obvious for you, but you can still Google and do the search. Um, so I would start there and emailing to see, what opportunities are available. Do they have trainings, regular workshops, those types of things. And I would get started there. And then lastly, I would say, like, just as a piece of advice, is that I always tell people you belong here and there is a space for you in ocean science because
Mhm.
we do have this very traditional track of like who is an ocean scientist or who can contribute to ocean science. But again, because we're all stakeholders on the planet of the ocean and we're all stewards, we all get to be involved. And so it doesn't matter if you're communicating, if you are simply on social media disseminating information about the ocean, there's a role for you there. And so you belong here, there's space for you, and you don't need a degree, you need a passion and a community that's interested in doing it.
Tell me, Neil, if
So
if somebody's coming to you who's in their 40s and 50s and they're saying, "Hey, all of a sudden you guys sparked my interest in this." What are you going to tell them? How did they get started?
So Jeanette did a great job talking about the organizations or the physical locales that you can check in order to build yourself up as an ocean scientist. I think the skill that you would need in order to act upon that is to ask questions. Find your story. If you're interested in ocean science, it's kind of like genres of music. There are different things that people like about it. The two of us like ocean sciences for completely different reasons. So if you find what you like, find your story, and then you start asking questions, the people who answer those questions are going to be your resources moving forward because they're just like you and they're going to bring you along from the ride.
That is an awesome way. Thank you. I'm going to wrap with that one. That is so amazing. Thank you both for being here today. Let's throw up our final slide here just to remind everybody where we are. Again, Creation Station Monthly, we will be back at the final Tuesday of August with our next installment. Thank you guys, everybody, very much for being here, and we'll see you soon.